When I started to see that, I'm like, oh, this is garbage. It's not 100% perfect. Like, I'm not going to use it. And funny enough, I was at Clock last year, and it was my first Clock. And I went to a seminar where it was put on by Stephanie Corey, and it was hands-on on how to create your own AI assistant. So I said, you know what? Let me try to get my hands dirty with this. And there was just something about that where I then went back to my hotel room and just spent the rest of the evening trying to create this agent that could just do automated NDA reviews and then give me a list of deviations. And I was like, wait, this is super cool. And through that, I started to shift my mindset from moving away from, hey, this is garbage because it's not perfect, to, hey, this is here to help you. It's not AI, but it's AI assist, which means it's not going to be 100% perfect, but let's say it's 60% perfect. You just have to now do 40% of that work versus 100% of that work.
Hi, everyone. This is Akshay Verma, the host of the Beacon Voices podcast. I'm also the Chief Operating Officer at Spotdraft. And today, excited to have a conversation with industry legend, and I'm going to call you that because it's turning out that way, Sean. Sean Rayani, who is the global head of legal operations at a little company you may have heard of called Twilio. Excited to talk about your career, Sean, your thoughts on legal operations and legal technology, and maybe learn a little too about you personally and your journey along the way. Sound good?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. Super excited to be here.
Absolutely. And it's glad to have you on the West Coast. I know you are based out of New York. We were just talking about how beautiful this weather is right now as the New York area is getting cold and snowy again. So welcome to sunny California. I hope you're enjoying it. It might be a little warm in that blazer, but I appreciate you dressing up for us today.
Of course. Coming back home it's always a good homecoming.
Yeah. Let's start with a little bit about your early career. You and I are both Cal grads. Go Bears.
Yes.
Talk to us a little bit about what it was like thinking about college, and if you had any expectations around what you were going to study, if you were going to do anything after college. What was that like for you early on?
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up in the North Bay, and I'm by way of background Indian, so a lot of high expectations coming from my family. College was always an expectation. It was the 13th grade, and ever since I was a kid, right? The C word in our house was college, so it was
Yeah.
very much ingrained that that is something that you were going to do, and there was a lot of pressure to go to good schools. And so from a very early age, it was I was thinking about Harvard and then Stanford and then Berkeley. And as I thought about it more and more, I said, you know what? I want to be far enough away from home, but not too far so I can always come back. When I was around 11 years old, my parents divorced, and my mom was running her own business. And we don't really have a ton of family here in the States. Most of our family is outside of the US. So I also wanted to be in close proximity so I could always come home and help my mom. And so, that took Harvard off the list very quickly.
I love that.
But then, you had Berkeley, you had Stanford, you had UCLA, UC Santa Barbara, and for the longest time, right, Berkeley was always my top choice, but I just didn't think I would be able to get in. But I said, hey, let's apply, right? Dream big. And lo and behold, I got in. So at that point, I was like, well, this is a no-brainer. And well, the funny thing is, I also applied to a bunch of these smaller public schools, or private schools rather. And it's interesting because when I was applying to schools, that's when Obama was elected president. So, that's when he started hearing about Occidental College. He went there for 2 years. So
Yeah.
I said, hey,
There you
that's
go.
where Obama went. Let's just go ahead and apply. The funny thing is, they ended up waitlisting me. And I was like, great. I'd never heard of this school before. You waitlisted me. And I was like, hey, take me off the wait list. And they're like, great. We want to know where you're going to go instead. And I said, oh, I'm going to go to Cal. I'm sure.
Hell yeah. Better choice anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. No regrets. And just from a career standpoint, since I was 12 years old, I knew that I wanted to go into law and be a lawyer. And from that early age, I really had my eye set on being a prosecutor.
Okay.
and then eventually being appointed to the bench and being a judge. And
Oh.
so there were many Halloweens where I took a Harry Potter robe, converted it into like a judge's robe, and wore that as like my costume, like over and over again, to the point where my friends were like, "We need to take you shopping. You can't wear
That's
the same thing every single year."
Now, did you have a wand or a gavel? Like, what did you do to actually get things done?
Oh yeah, gavel, of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
I love it.
I mean, like, look, like wands are great, but like
Yeah.
a gavel is really you need that force to get
It
things done.
makes a great sound. I love that.
Yeah.
First of all, I gotta say, you are a far better and conscientious Indian child than I am, because when I was making the decision to go to college and I went to high school in Arizona, I was like, how far away from my parents can I possibly get? And Berkeley happened to be one of the top. Same pressure. I totally get where you're coming from on this.
Right.
Happened to be one of the top schools that I got into that was far enough away. The
Right.
others were on the East Coast, Sean. I'm gonna tell you, like, when we moved to this country, I was in Cleveland, and like, I love the snow, but like in like 1 week spurts where I get to go skiing,
Right.
not to live, walk, and drive in, like that wasn't going to be for me. So the East Coast was kind of off the table for me. And so Berkeley was a natural fit. So I loved it. And then you know what they did? In my first semester, they moved back to the Bay Area. So they
Well,
followed me.
you
So
can't
instead of a 2 hour plane ride, I was a 1 hour drive away from my parents for most of college. So,
you can run, but you can't hide.
no, you
For
can't.
sure.
Yeah, they'll follow you everywhere.
Yeah.
All right. So you want to be a prosecutor? Like, why? Like, what was it about that? About being a lawyer, being a judge, prosecutor? What was it about those things that really spoke to you at such an early age?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, really, it was my parents' divorce, right? Like in our household, I didn't have the best relationship with my father, and just based on that, in terms of how he treated my mom and me, and I have a younger sister. You're able to just learn a lot, and are really expected to grow up at a young age, and based on that, I really wanted to help victims of crime. I also had very, very, very big ambitions. I was like, I want to eradicate crime in the United States. I want to eradicate poverty in the United States. Every single case that I have, whether it's a misdemeanor or a felony, I'm going to take every single case to a jury trial, and I'm going to get guilty verdicts across the board. Now that I have a bit more sense, you come to realize, hey, that's actually not a good use of like taxpayer money. And like whatever county I'd be working in, everybody would hate me because their full time job would be serving as a juror. So, as you grow up, you learn a bit more. But that was really the sort of angle that I was coming at, maybe a little too aggressively, but all with the right intentions,
Yeah,
and wanted to take that a step further as well. In terms of being a judge and being that referee, and making sure that you're able to dispense justice equitably, and really being able to help people.
yeah.
Yeah.
Look, Judge Rayani has a really nice ring to it, but I think our profession is better because you decided to go a different route, and so
Yes.
we'll talk a little bit about that. But talk to me about your Cal experience. I mean, did you find what you were looking for? Did you, looking back now, like, did you think it was the right choice?
Yeah, absolutely. I have zero regrets. I'm so happy I decided to go there. It really um, stretched me in ways that I never would have thought, both like intellectually and socially. I think high school was great, and I had great educators, but I think just the holistic experience of going somewhere like different and having to meet new people and make new friends, and also being able to think about just different types of things, both in life and theoretically, in different ways, just pushes you outside of your comfort zone, in ways you never would have imagined. A lot of my friends, I was very close to my friends from high school, and most of them actually ended up staying back here at home. So I was one of the few that actually left. So kind of leaving that sort of safety net was really hard for me in that first year.
Yeah,
But I'm so grateful that I had that experience, because I wouldn't be able to live in a place like New York today by myself had I not had those kinds of experiences. Or, as we'll talk about, even with Twilio relocated me to Europe for a year, and I helped build the commercial legal team out there. Even that kind of an experience, had I not had that early experience of leaving home and going somewhere else for school, and figuring out like, how to get your feet under you, how to make friends, how to create a new family, so to speak. I think it would have made some of these other experiences that I've had much more challenging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but you're going along in your undergrad years, and at some level, you had intentions of going to law school and becoming a lawyer, a prosecutor, and a judge. When did that change, and like, what was the impetus for that?
Yeah. So for me, I had a great experience at Cal. If I had to look back, I wish I was I was a little bit more reckless compared to what my actual experience was like, right? Because I was all about like, getting the good grades, and I was going to office hours and doing all of those things. And really all of it was in furtherance of getting good grades so I could get into a good law school. So for me, in the grand scheme of things, like college was really a pit stop to like get into law school because it's a prerequisite. And so once I graduated, I was trying to figure out what to do. And initially I wanted to go straight through,
Yeah.
but a lot of folks said, "Hey, like just take some time and experience life. That's never going to hurt you." Like when I interned at the district attorney's office here every summer throughout my college experience. So I would talk to a lot of those lawyers, and especially the ones that went straight through. They all said, "Hey, I really wish I would have taken some time off to just
Sage advice.
yeah, enjoy life." I remember there was one lawyer that I worked with. He is now a judge, and he said to me, he's like, "Hey, I graduated, and for 2 years, like I just worked in a warehouse and like built furniture." And he's like, just doing something completely different, like outside of a school setting and outside of a formal professional setting, just naturally gives you a very different perspective and a different way of looking at things than if you just kind of go, straight through in these experiences that are contextually very similar.
Yeah.
And so I said, I'm going to take 2 years, and what I'll do is I'll work, but I'll also study for the LSAT at the same time. And I like wanted to get experience in a different area of law that wasn't criminal law. And an area of law that I always really thought was interesting was commercial contracts. And I remember
Interesting.
when I was in college, I was trying to sublet my place for the summer because I signed a 12-month lease, but I was coming home for the summer, and I was
Okay.
like, I don't want to lose out on that money. So I drafted my own like subleasing agreement, and used defined terms for the first time and did all of it. I mean, like it was completely like unenforceable because I could not sublet my
Because the
apartment under
provision was in your original lease that you can
exactly.
do it. Yeah,
So,
yeah.
it had like absolutely like no enforceability, and it actually turns out that the person we subletted to ended up burning down our kitchen. So that was
Oh my gosh.
I know.
Wow.
I know. So yeah, that didn't go so well. The piece of paper that I drafted didn't really do us much good. But just like those kinds of experiences, as I said, this is super interesting. Let me see what a different area of law brings. Right? It's always good to have experiences in different areas of law and then figure out how you can analogize across those areas of law. I just think it makes you a much stronger legal professional. So at this point, I was like, "Hey, I'm going to study for the LSAT. Let me just see what's out there." And I ended up getting a job at OpenTable, the restaurant reservation company, as a contracts cataloger. And so when I first started, my role was to take contracts that were printed out. I had to take staples out manually, like
Wow.
I know, and this was like 2013 too.
Yeah.
Like take staples out manually, like put pieces of paper in between them, and then scan all of them. And I spent a way too much time trying to like remove all these paper jams from the copier, and then go back to what we used as a CLM and had to like manually file them. And then I had to take all these paper copies, staple them again, print out labels, and put them in a filing cabinet.
Yeah.
And so, even in like my first 2 weeks there, I said, "Hey, there has to be a better way of doing this. Like, this just makes no sense." And so, from the get go, I just started offering different solutions to my manager and the general counsel around, "Hey, do you really need to like save like a hard copy of this when you already have a digital copy? Because you're renting out like space on the fifth floor. and there's no more room for additional cabinets, and you're having to pay rent for that. So,
Yeah.
just from and very like sort of early stage, like thinking about how can we make things more efficient and better. And during that time, I was studying for the LSAT, which was like a horrendous experience. So I ended up studying for like a year. And then again, had big goals. I was like, oh, I want to go to Harvard Law School, or I want to go to like NYU or Columbia or even Berkeley. Took the LSAT, did not do anywhere like close to as well as I wanted to perform. And so that was something that I think, it stung because this has always been a goal and I spent so much time working towards this goal. But then, I said, you know what, let me just sit on this and like actually just throw myself into work 100% and see what happens. And so that's exactly what I did. And I just ended up being more curious. So, I would see like lawyers on my team exchanging red lines. And I just went up to them and I said, hey, I see that you've marked all this stuff up, but I don't know why. Can you like spend 30 minutes with me and just walk me through this? And they were super gracious. They were like, oh
That's
my
awesome.
God, it's amazing that you're so interested in this. Like, we'd love to have you start taking first passes at red lines. And so that's really how I got into more of like the commercial work,
Yep.
which ended up being super interesting. And then, you know, towards my sort of tail end there, like I was looking for something that was going to give me a bit more growth. I still hadn't completely discounted, law school as a whole, but I said, hey, let me, like I'm now in tech. I had no idea what tech was before I joined OpenTable. I had no idea that I was going to explode into this amazing, cool thing that now dominates our lives in so many ways. So I said, let me look around and see if I can find some other growth opportunities. And the interesting thing is Twilio was a client or a service provider for OpenTable.
Okay.
And so I was like, okay, funky name for a company. And when they had this opening, I said, all right, let me apply. Went through the interview process. It was a much smaller, scrappier company at the time. I think only 600 employees, pre-IPO. And for me, it just seemed like a really good fit. And especially working in a smaller environment where you could just get your hands dirty, seemed very appealing to me. And so I also got a sense of like, they may be going public sometime soon, so
Yep.
this would also be
And
a really
now
good experience, like to like get in and see what this looks like. So
yeah,
I kept my fingers crossed. I was like, I really hope I get an offer, and I did, and the rest is history now.
that's fantastic. It's, by the way, it's a really, really small world. Who was the GC at OpenTable back then in 2013, 14?
John Orda.
Yeah, John Orda. So he was my client at Axiom. I will bet you, Sean, you and I exchanged emails when I was at Axiom, especially if you were in the role that you were in,
Yeah,
probably to get the Axiom contract signed to
probably.
start
Yeah,
providing support to John. What a
yeah,
small world. Um, so contracting really kind of spoke to you, and I actually didn't know that little tidbit story. This is why I love having these conversations, because now, as I know your career at Twilio, and I've seen what you do, and we've talked about it before, the way that you attack those problems, you literally came in at the ground floor of Staples. Like, I will go that far to go as like, you took some of the biggest pain points, and I live in this world now,
right.
of contracting that we used to have. And granted, the pain points are a little bit different now, but not really, because so many of our customers, like, it's a big win for them just to get their contracts into one place
Oh,
so that they are
absolutely.
searchable and you can get, insights from them. But to hear your story about taking this very horse and buggy solution, which was, hey, John, like, our stuff is sitting in file cabinets on the fifth floor and we're running out of space. Oh, and by the way, you also have digital copies. Like, there's an infinite amount of space in the cloud. How about we just make that easy switch and we'll either save some money or you hire more people, we can put them somewhere.
Right.
Um, you really started to understand the operational side of things.
Yeah, yeah.
So talk to us about Twilio. Like, what was your first couple of years like? What did you dive into first? Was it purely on the commercial contracting side, or did you start to touch on other aspects of legal operations as well?
Yeah. So, when I came in, the legal team was 9 people. And just for scale, we're at 130 people now on the legal
Wow.
team. And the commercial team it was just four of us. And now the commercial team that we have is like close to 30 plus people. So you're able to see, the scale. And as I mentioned, we were at like 650 employees at that time. We're close to 6,000 now. So, like pretty 10x growth, pretty
Yeah.
significant,
Yeah.
which is, I mean, when you look back in retrospect, it's very moving in a number of different ways. But when I came in, started doing a number of go-to-market deals, also vendor deals, product integration deals, and what was great is my uh, boss at the time, the head of commercial. She was great. And even though I didn't have a law degree, she said, "Hey, I fully trust you." She's like, "You come with great experience like that a lot of folks on our team don't have, like working at another company, and so you can help us really up level our commercial processes." And I'm very opinionated, so I'm not one to shy away from offering like different perspectives or solutions to problems that I see. And so very similarly, right? Like I've had people say, "Hey, you should probably just like shut up for 6 months," and like I don't do that. Like, so you're just never going to get that with me. So I just started offering up solutions like right away. I remember in my like first 2 weeks, I'm like, "You have two different agreement templates, and the biggest difference between the two of them is one of them is month to month, and the other one has like an annual term that auto renews. Like, let's just make this a variable field, and let's get rid of one of these templates. Like there really is no material difference." And just things like that are super small. And she was always open to that. And also as a part of that journey, 3 months after I joined, Twilio ended up going public, and that was the first IPO of 2016 after there was a bit of a hiatus where companies weren't going public.
Yeah.
And our IPO was wildly successful. So even just seeing like something like that, like what does it mean for a company to go through like IPO readiness to
Yeah.
become an enterprise based company, I think is huge. Also seeing like, all right, you had this executive panel. Like how does that change as you get ready to go public, right? Oftentimes you have certain turnover. You want to bring in folks who have taken companies public before. And so just getting that like broad exposure, and seeing how companies tactically set themselves up for the future, it is just so insightful. Because oftentimes I think like with work, folks just focus on like what they have to do before them, right? And they focus on those tasks, but they often don't look up and out or feel like they need to do that. And when you
Yeah.
do that, you're able to take the direct work that you do, and tie it back to like what the company's trying to achieve. And I think that's so important because it really motivates you, right? You're not just like this anonymous cog in a machine. You are doing something that has impact, and you're able to trace that like up and all the way back down from whatever your company's strategy is. And so like engaging in that type of experience was super helpful. And then about 8 months in, my boss pulls me into a room and she said, "Hey, so you're single and you don't own anything." And I was like,
What?
"Yeah." I'm like, "Yeah, that's
It's,
correct." Like you,
it
I'm like,
sounds like two HR violations in two
I mean, it
sentences.
is, but you know what? Like, I love her, so I was like, she's onto something. But I was like, I don't know if I should feel good about my life or bad. But then
Yeah.
she was like, "So, um, given those aspects, would you want to move to Dublin, Ireland?" And I said, "Tell me more." She said, "Oh, our general counsel would like to put someone in region to support our EMEA team, because they're going to undergo some pretty rapid growth in the region." And like that was never on my radar. Like leaving California actually was never on my radar. I thought I
Yeah.
was always going to be here. And so, I talked to people because law school was still something that was, in the back of my head. I thought, oh, I'll do like 2 years at Twilio and then I'll go to law school and then we'll see what happens. And again, I talked to a lot of people, and mentors, and all of them actually said the same thing. They said, "Hey, if we had the experience or the opportunity that you have to go somewhere else and like live somewhere else and also have like a once in a lifetime opportunity career wise," they're like, we would take it. They said, look, law school will always be there. You could always come back and then go to law school, but these types of opportunities don't come up that often. And they said, hey, they're like, I have young kids. I tell my young kids, this all the time too. Like, if you get these opportunities, take them. And if you think about it, like, that is a bit of a departure from like how I was raised, because I
Yes.
think if I went and asked my mom, she would probably say, no, you need to go back to school. Like, why would you go move and like live in Europe?
Yeah.
But I said, hey, screw it. Let's see what this brings. It was initially going to be for a year. So I said, hey, like, it seems like there can only be upside from this. And so towards the end of 2017, I ended up moving to Dublin, Ireland. And I will say, like, one of like the best experiences of my life of the past decade. Like, going there, like, we were working in this like tiny little co-working space. There was like only 20 of us at that time, and just working with like the people in that region on getting deals done, working with customers that have different types of expectations. Like, it just gives you all of this insight and exposure that you normally wouldn't get. And on top of that, with everyone being in San Francisco, we were still very headquarters focused.
Yeah.
It put me in a position where I really had to make a judgment call on
Yeah.
a bunch of different things, like, on my own. And I had to like become very comfortable with that, and also be able to defend it if someone from San Francisco said, hey, why did you do it? And why didn't you check with anyone? And
Yeah.
so being able to build that confidence, like, really goes a long way. I don't think I would be able to make decisions confidently today had I not been put in that position.
I mean, that kind of experience is invaluable for exactly that purpose. I talk to my kids a lot now about, they get into these life situations, they're teenagers, um, and sometimes they'll be like, well, how come you knew how to do that? I was like, well, when you've gone through it like 5 or 6 times and you've screwed up the first 3 or 4 times, then you kind of get good at making the right decision. the first.
Right.
So here's a spicy question for you, Sean, without
Yeah.
divulging any specifics. Like, can you think about one instance where you're like, oh shit, I really screwed this decision up, but you move through it and you learn and you move forward?
Let me put it this way. There were indemnities that I offered that, if I look back now, I'm like, what the heck were you thinking?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You
fair.
know,
But look, that's also part of like what kind of risk appetite do we have? Are we willing to try new things? Are we willing to accept risk? And you don't necessarily have to make those in a vacuum. Like, if this is
right.
something I talk about with lawyers all the time, and it's amazing that you have this experience too. Is like, well, you're gonna get some level of cover from whoever it is that you're working with, because you're probably not making a totally unilateral decision. You've gotten some level of pre-approval to make
Right.
these kinds of decisions, and at the end of the day, like, it's not going to break the company. You'll be just fine.
Well, exactly. And again, I think, you take the entire context, right? And the entire set of like circumstances and factors into consideration when you make those decisions. And the reality is, you're never going to be working off of information that's 100% complete and 100% accurate, right? And I think as legal professionals, we gravitate towards perfection so much.
Yeah.
And when you work in a business, like, that just doesn't exist. Or even if the information is good, it could completely change tomorrow.
Yeah.
And you have to then take all of that sort of imperfect information, or information that was complete but is now no longer complete, and make something out of it, right? That's logically sound,
Yeah.
and be able to defend it. And so, even with that experience, as someone who's type A, like, you're also not going to meet anyone out there who's like an insane perfectionist as much as I am. And those experiences, right, like, really help to like kind of take away this sort of like wall that I had around, hey, like, like, perfection doesn't exist. Like, you have to figure out how to like get comfortable with working within like imperfect circumstances, to keep things moving, because it's actually a bigger risk to hold things up because you're spending like 50 days trying to find the perfect solution, versus moving something forward in 5, where you're making like, an educated decision based on the information that you have.
There's perfect, which is ruins companies, and then there's what's good enough, and that accelerates companies. I think that's a
Exactly.
really good mantra that I've certainly learned after my lawyering days, because lawyers, like, when you get hammered your entire legal career, that you forgot to put the appropriate number of spaces between certain sentences in your brief, if that's what you're getting hammered on day in and day out, yeah, it's gonna turn you a certain way. You do that in the business, you're not gonna last very long. It's just not gonna
No.
happen.
What
Uh,
and like what was really eye-opening to me is like, usually you think, oh, we all work for the same company, right? So we're here for the same goal and we're all going to follow rules. And I'm like, actually, no, that's not what happens. If you're a blocker, people will just circumvent you
yeah,
and they don't care. And then they'll
nope,
ask for forgiveness and then throw you under the bus. So, like,
yes,
this idea of like, hey, like, if you're taking too long on something because you're really trying to cross every T, dot every I, yeah, it actually ends up becoming more of a risk because they'll just go around you at that point. So, you really
absolutely
have
right.
to figure out how you cover the big risks and are able to move things forward.
All right, so you're plugging along, you go to Dublin. At what point, and maybe this has already happened, so you let me know about it. At what point at your tenure at Twilio are you like, yeah, legal ops, this is a thing for me now? Like, this is where I'm headed.
Yeah. So when I was actually in Dublin, I was a contracts manager, but then I was doing a lot of improvement with our like CLM stuff. And I remember I actually went to our general counsel at that time because I would work a full day, and then at 5 p.m. everybody in the office would leave and go home,
Yeah.
and I was like, you know what? I have to like stay on now because it's 9 a.m. in San Francisco. So I have to join all these meetings. And if I don't, I'm going to get iced out. And I don't want that to happen. So I would
Mm,
have meetings at the office by myself until about like 10:30 at night. And then I would have to tell people, I'm like, look, I really have to leave because I called a restaurant to order dinner and that restaurant is about to close. So I have to like go pick up dinner. So I'd like go to the restaurant, pick up dinner. You didn't have very good public transportation. So then I'd have to like walk home 30 minutes. I'd like scarf down dinner. And then
wow.
at like midnight, I would like log back on. So then I would work until like 4 p.m. like Pacific Standard Time. So you essentially worked like two shifts.
Wow.
But I was like, I'm like, I'm not going to get iced out. And really during the nighttime, that's when I was able to meet with folks and focus on some of the more operational stuff that I was doing. But also during that time, I went to our general counsel and I said, hey, I'm doing all this ops stuff. You may want to hire a legal ops manager so they can do all this stuff so I don't have to. And the funny thing is, I never thought I would eventually end up in a legal ops role. So it's again funny how life works. And so we that's she actually thought about that, and that's how we ended up making like our first legal ops hire. But a lot of the commercial ops work that I did continued to stay with me.
Yeah.
And towards the end of my tenure in Dublin, there was a decision like, do you want to stay? Do you want to move back? And I said, okay, I want to move back, but I don't want to come back to the Bay Area. I want to go to New York because while I was in Europe, I supported our European markets, but I also supported the East Coast because of the time zone overlap,
Yep.
and that's where we did all of our multi-million-dollar deals. And everyone always said, "Hey, like if you have the opportunity to live in New York, like give it a
Should.
shot." So
Yeah.
exactly. So I went back to my boss. I was like, "Hey, guess what? I'm still single and don't own anything. Like, what do you
It's
think?"
okay if you say it, but just to be clear, it's okay if you say it, but
I was like, what about moving to New York? And they said, yeah, go for it. Which is how now I've been there for 7 years, but that's how I ended up there. And during my time there, I would do deals, but then as we continued to go through these growth surges as a company, and we were doing a bunch of acquisitions, like we were going into highly regulated countries, like there continued to be this need for more and more commercial legal ops support to make contracting more efficient. And so leading up to the pandemic, my role kept expanding. And while I was doing the commercial deal negotiation, I was moonlighting as this ops person. And during the pandemic, that's when they said, hey, why don't you move into like a full time commercial legal ops role? And so that's kind of how I made that transition from deal negotiations into more of a full-time ops role, and having that experience doing the deal work
Yep.
was super valuable. I think as you know, for any ops professional, if you've lived through those problems and
Absolutely.
those challenges, like that is so useful because these things don't
Absolutely.
exist in a vacuum and they also differ from company to company. So if you know what the problems are like within your company and how folks react to it, like it sets you up for so much success as you actually try to become a change agent.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
look, my holy trifecta for legal operations has always been people, process, technology. And if you have lived and worked with the people and you have been and engaged in the process, then your ability to understand any technological solution, any process improvement, whatever the change management may be, gives you a huge leg up. Which is, I mean,
Absolutely.
many of us do it without having had that kind of granular experience actually engaging in the specific work, but it can only help. That's a fantastic transition as well for you, I think.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah. All right. So you get into legal ops. What was your sense? Like, did you know what legal ops was at the time, or was it kind of like, oh, it's a new role, and I know that the people on this team have been doing it, and so I'm going to join them? Or was there something more in it for you that you had already seen about legal operations?
Yeah, no, I mean, I didn't really have much exposure to it, but I loved the work. And so while we had like a general legal ops team, I basically created my own shadow organization because I had that commercial experience. So I was able to have like this deeper insight into the issues that were specific to our go to market team and our commercial legal team that our broader legal operations team didn't have. And so that's why like my role was kind of carved out and I continued to sit under commercial legal. And our head of commercial legal, who's still with Twilio, like one of the best managers that I've ever had, like was super invested in my growth. And the way he and I thought about contracting was like spot on. Like he always knew the value of ops. He always was about keeping things simple. And so like our first big project together was completely revamping our entire contracting framework, redrafting all of our terms and conditions, like making things as simple as possible. So our go to market team could bring on customers that allowed them to onboard, but then also allowed them to expand very easily without having to like sign more paperwork. Like the fact of the matter is, anytime like you want to expand a customer's use of your products and services, if you're going to throw more paper at them, that's just more friction. So if you're able to take a lot of that away, it makes it a much better experience for your go to market team, but it also lessens the work for you, like as a contracts manager or a commercial lawyer, reserving your time for like real deal work that actually matters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you think about operations now? Like, as you sit in this new role, you've been in this leadership role for 8 or 9 months now, I think.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a lot more under your remit than just commercial agreements and commercial contracting, because legal operations is so much broader than that. But, and especially at a company like Twilio, like commercial contracting is a big component of success for the company. But now that you have all these other things that are under your remit, like how has that evolved your thought process on how legal operations and the role that legal operations plays with both the legal department and the company? Like, how has that evolved for you over the last year?
Yeah, absolutely. I will say, like first and foremost, I think for folks wanting to get into legal operations, I think there are a number of different paths. But for me, I think having that experience, that commercial experience, and then that commercial ops experience was like super, super invaluable. I think it's a really good way to like cut your teeth and get into legal ops because the thing is, it's very high pressure, right? Because there's revenue that's on the line.
Yep.
And at so many companies, what sort of like high volume work do you have? It's contracts, right? And so if you're able to take things that have high visibility that people are freaking out about all the time and coming at you from all different directions, while also tackling something that by nature is very high volume and making it make sense and making it efficient, like I think that right there is like the crux of legal operations, no matter what sort of legal functional like area you apply that to. I think you can take those principles and apply them to litigation or privacy or ethics and compliance. It really helps to create this framework and a way of thinking that really ends up being repeatable across different legal domains.
So then that gets us a little bit into kind of the technology side of things with legal operations. And there's certainly been a little bit of a narrative in the last, I don't know, 3 or 4 years. And I should say, by the way, like, I was a practicing lawyer, and then I went into the business side of things at Axiom. I was in 2012. My first 3 to 4-ish years, all of my client contacts at Axiom were lawyers. There were GCs, there were their deputies. And then there was this very quick but large shift in who I was engaging with as an outside consultant doing the work with Axiom. And they happened to be the head of legal ops. And so you saw this shift in kind of who was the gatekeeper, who was thinking through the management of the legal department, shift from senior lawyers kind of doing it on the side with the help of IT if it was a technology issue, or with the help of finance if there were billing issues and economic issues, to a more centralized function that was really managing, or at least trying to manage the business aspect of running that legal department. And so, with that, very quickly came the advent and the importance of legal technology as a player in the legal operations space. The more recent narrative, which is a little bit controversial, I don't know, I think some people have a very strong reaction to this. I'd love to get yours.
Yeah.
Is legal operations just becoming legal technology at this point? What's your view on that?
I don't think so. I think legal technology is a component, but like legal technology, in order for it to be effective, can't exist in a vacuum. And the way that I sort of think about it is similar to you with your like guiding principles of people, process, and technology. I look at it in terms of a pyramid, and your foundational layer is actually people, process, and then the third element is knowledge and data. And then the layer on top of that is technology. And with everything going on now, the layer on top of that, like that technology layer, is AI, because I
Yeah.
view AI as a form of technology, another tool in your toolkit that just happens to be very powerful. But with technology, right, in order for technology to work, you need to have that foundational piece in place. And if you don't, like, technologies can actually compound your problem. And I'll give you an example. We had acquired a company and we inherited their commercial legal team. And I was going through like their intake system where they had these requests for commercial legal support because we were trying to merge them into our process. So I wanted to clean it up so we had good data. And I go into it and there were like 1,300 tickets that were open. And so I go to their head of commercial and I said, hey, it looks like you have like 1,300 like requests that are sitting with you, and this spans over 3 years. Can you tell me what's going on? And the response that I got was, "Oh yeah, so we just leave it up to sales to close out those tickets." I was like, "Okay, well they're not doing it, and if anybody looks at this data, which is not accurate, it looks like all this work is sitting with you, and it's not complete. And if you want to report on any of this, like you can't do it. Like if anyone asks you, like, hey, how many deals are you working on in a month
Yeah.
or a quarter? Like you
Yeah.
can't report on any of that. And that right there is a very like simple example, but it's like you just didn't have any like process around like who's responsible for closing a ticket, when do you close it out, like just those sorts of things, so you can have one an accurate view of like what your work is at any given time, and two actually be able to go out there and like brag about your work and give your team credit for all the hard work that they're putting in. But see, like the intake tool that you had, that's technology. We're spending money on it, but it's not really doing you any favors.
Yeah.
And that's because you didn't have elements in that foundational layer in place. And so I think really like for any legal department, like you need to have legal ops folks to really help put that foundation in place at the bottom, because then as you add on like technology and AI, like the when you go up each layer in that pyramid, it acts as a force multiplier, and you end up seeing more and more returns on investment. And when you have all those layers sort of working together, I call it like the sort of like multi-layer orchestration. When those work together, that's when you actually get what I call like modern legal service delivery, a really good experience for your business stakeholders working with you. That's efficient, but also an efficient experience for your legal folks because they're able to get through like mundane work very quickly, or they're able to automate it and then really focus their time on the work that I believe they always should have been focusing on.
That's a great segue into the next kind of part of this conversation, which is going to be around AI. But before we get there, how do you, so other than the things that you have just kind of laid out and how you think about um, people, process, knowledge and data, technology, and so forth, as you're considering the potential for new technology, what is one piece of advice that you would give to every single legal ops leader out there who is in the same situation where either somebody at the company or department has said, "Hey, we should look at a tool for this," or they've had some conversations at a conference with a seller or a provider of that technology. Oh, you should really check this out. What's one piece of advice you'd give them?
Yeah, I would say you need to think about what problem you're trying to solve. What is your problem statement? And you could have a series of problem statements, that's
Yep.
fine. But each statement should have one problem, because oftentimes when problems or issues are surfaced up to you, it's a conflation of problems, right? It's not just one problem, and so you kind of have to untangle that and really figure out, like, what are the individual problems that you're being asked to solve. And as you sort of like uncouple all of this, you may realize, hey, like, 3 out of the 5 problems have to do with like a completely different department, right? And it's because, like, they're not following a particular process that they've outlined for the company.
Yeah.
Um, and that way you're able to get sort of surgical around like what's in your control and what you should do, and like what sort of sits in other people's worlds, instead of just trying to like go out and get something that's new and shiny, hoping that by implementing it, all your problems are going to disappear. And as a part of that analysis, I always do this. I ask the question why 5 times. So when I'm talking to people, they'll say, "Oh, this is the problem." I'm like, "Why?" They'll say something else. I'm like, "Why?" And so, I mean, they probably like want to like
Yep.
strangle me,
As
but
they should, as they should feel that way because it's important to dig in.
exactly. And that's how you really end up getting to these root causes, because like the technology that's available out there isn't cheap, and the amount of time and effort it takes to implement that takes time away from a bunch of other work and support that you and your team can be lending. And especially in the legal ops world, right? Like it's still a very lean function. It's really encouraging to see legal leaders, GCs, CLOs prioritizing that. But if you have like 1 or 2 people, that's still quite lean. And if you're going to engage in like a very complex implementation, it's very hard to focus on anything else. So you really want to take the time to make sure you understand what you're trying to solve for, instead of just going out there and buying things. And oftentimes, like, even when I do figure out what the problem is, I don't jump to like a tool. I first say, hey, let's actually document this, because there's no documentation like anywhere. Let's document it. Let's create like a process or a policy, and see if that makes things better. Because the thing is, if folks don't know what to do, you can't really get mad at them for like not like doing what you think they should do, right?
Yeah.
And so if you're able to codify it, train them on it, socialize it, then you're able to see, okay, I haven't spent any money. We've come up with consistency based on standards. How much of the problem does that solve? And then you can reassess and say, okay, like what's the trade-off here, right? Like, is it still worth their time to do this, or should we actually look at a tool to automate it?
Yeah. Great advice on how to think about technology. All right, let's make the shift because you literally cannot have a conversation these days without that two-letter word called AI. How are you personally thinking about artificial intelligence and what impact do you think it's having on legal operations today?
Absolutely. So, funny enough, as someone who's a perfectionist, as I said, everyone was talking about Chat GPT, and I'll say I was a very late adopter. I remember, I used it a couple of times, and this is when a lot of the LLMs like weren't that great.
Yeah.
So when,
Which was
what
like just 2 weeks ago, by the way. It's improved a lot since then.
for sure, exactly right. But I remember, it's funny. I would like put things in, and I was like, "Look, I'm like." I would ask it like medical advice, right? And I'm like no doctor, but it would like give me things, and I was like I didn't go to med school, but this is like wrong. And so when I started to see that, I'm like, oh, this is garbage. It's not 100% perfect. Like, I'm not going to use it. And funny enough, I was at Clock last year, and it was my first Clock conference, and I went to a seminar where it was put on by Stephanie Corey, and it was hands on how to create your own AI assistant. So I said, you know what? Let me like try to get my hands dirty with this. And like there was just something about that where like I then went back to my hotel room and just spent the rest of the evening trying to create this like agent that could just do like automated NDA reviews and then give me like a list of deviations. And I was like, wait, this is super cool. And through that, I started to shift my mindset from moving away from, hey, this is garbage because it's not perfect, to, hey, like this is here to help you. Like it's not AI, but it's AI assist, which means it's not going to be 100% perfect. But let's
Hmm.
say it's 60% perfect. You just have to now do 40% of that work versus 100% of that work. And for me, like that was like very, very like insightful, because like that mindset shift has been so important, because even now I use like AI every single day. Like Claude is my best friend, and
Yep.
I've told my friends in our group chat, I'm like, hey, you've all been replaced by my new friend Claude, who is from Paris.
Yeah.
So it's pretty funny. But with that, like it's having the right set of expectations around it, I think is super critical to get that value out of it and to continue to um, go down this like journey of adoption.
Do you think there's a mind shift away from some of the things that you found foundational in choosing non-AI legal technology over time? Do you think there's a mind shift change that needs to happen as we think in our professions as legal operators about choosing AI? Or do you think it's fundamentally the same thing? It's just a different kind of technology and a more powerful one.
I actually I think it's a little bit of both, right? I think in one regard, I view it as I said, like a subset of technology in my
Yeah.
pyramid. It happens to be one that's very, very powerful. It's also one that's a bit more open-ended, right? Like if you think of like an e-billing tool or a CLM, like that's very purpose-built, but like a Claude or a Gemini, like you could do so many different things with it. And I think oftentimes that creates a sense of fear, because you're like, I don't, like I can do anything with this.
Yeah.
So I don't know where to start. Like, what if it's wrong? Like, what if I take something that was a bad output and put it into my work? So there's a lot of fear that comes with it. But what I've noticed is the best antidote to fear is curiosity. And the only way you can go down that journey is if you get your hands dirty. And what I often tell folks is, hey, you know what? Like, there's all this fear and there's all this chatter around, oh, AI is going to take away jobs. I think of it very differently. I actually think of it as, hey, give AI all the work that you don't want to do, like all the grunt work, like, writing emails, first drafts, like the number of times I'll like write something up and give it to like Gemini and say, hey, can you grade my email from like an eighth or an F and let me know what's going on here? Like it just like use it for those types of things, because that opens up the time for you to focus on like the substantive legal work that I believe you should have been doing this whole time. And if you think about it in that way, like no one's taking away that legal work that you want to do. It's just over time, like you've had all this other work that's been added to your plate, right? That's administrative or requires a lot of legwork to get to that substantive work.
Yeah.
And now you can automate it or reduce the amount of time it takes to focus on that, so you can focus on the real things that you should be focusing on.
To
Um,
me, that has been like the holy grail of legal ops, right? Like
yeah,
our goal, our mission has been to create space for the legal team in order to be able to enable the business. So fits
yeah.
in very nicely with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it definitely fits in nicely with like the two elements that you described. Like I think you need to have a mindset shift, because it's an open-ended form of technology, a very powerful one, and very different from anything that we've seen. But I
Yeah.
also think in many ways it's again another tool in your toolkit that you can use
Yeah.
alongside like more traditional SaaS-based technology, right? Like none of that's going away. And I also think we shouldn't forget about that. I think with AI, we need to strategically deploy it. And AI isn't going to be good for like every single activity or tasks. Like you're still going to want to use traditional legal technology for that. And there may be other subset of work where technology is not appropriate. So
Yeah.
I think that toolkit analogy is one that really goes a long way.
Fantastic. All right. I have three standard questions that I ask every guest. Yours are slightly altered. Many of
Okay.
my guests are lawyers, others are from legal ops. So these are kind of legal ops based. All right, you ready?
Yep.
Number one, if you were starting in legal operations today, so think about anybody new breaking in,
Yep.
What would you have them focus on in the first year or two?
Intake. And when I say intake, like no Slack, no email. And I will say this: the last couple of weeks have been so busy at work. Like
Yeah,
my email is blowing up and my Slack is blowing up, and I just sit there and I'm like, what is this outdated, archaic, like just chaotic technology? Like this is crap. And so the one thing I would do, especially like if you have a small department or you're a solo practitioner, have things come in like a structured way, because even like psychologically and emotionally, if everyone's coming at you, like it's very, very overwhelming. And
sure.
imagine if you're a solo practitioner, you're just
Oof.
like, holy shit, how am I going
Yeah,
to do this? Right.
yeah.
But if things are coming in a structured way and it's categorized, like that helps, because you're not going to lose track of these things. You can triage, you can reorganize it. And then on the back end, you end up getting some really good like data points from all that metadata very easily. And then you can figure out, okay, like in the midst of all this like firefighting and legal work that I'm doing, what can I focus on based on what the data tells me to like empower the business to go further, right? Whether it's like an intranet site or a chat bot or FAQs or things like that. But the thing is, in order to figure out where to focus your like precious time, you need to have data to back that up. And then what you're able to do is see the effectiveness of those small improvements you're able to make to see, okay, I rolled out FAQs. Am I getting fewer inquiries? And then you can continue to look at the data to see how it evolves to figure out what else to focus on later. But this gives you like a holistic view of that. And it can also inform technology decisions, right? Like if all of your work is commercial work,
Yep.
like, yeah, you may need a CLM. If everyone's asking you, well, we sign contracts, like, what do they say? You may need like a post signature repository. So it allows you to also be more strategic in terms of investments that cost money.
It gives you both a snapshot, but also a canary in the coal mine
Yeah,
with which to kind of focus your efforts. I love that. All right.
absolutely.
I think I know the answer to this one, but let's see. What's a career bet that you've made that compounded for you more than you expected?
Staying at the same company for almost a decade. It
Okay.
was not on my bingo card.
Yeah.
I'm a millennial, so like
Yeah.
most millennials stay at jobs between, what was it, 12 and 24 months.
That's right.
I was talking to a friend about this. I was like, oh, I'm like, I feel like I'm Joe who worked at Prudential for like 35 years
Yeah.
and made this like career out of it. But honestly, like there's so many different like companies out there, and I get like the fascination, right, of jumping from company to company to company. I just think if you stay somewhere for a good period of time, it's super beneficial in any kind of a legal role, especially in house, to see the business go through different cycles. And what I've seen is I saw a company that was going through series funding, that went through an IPO, that had insane growth surges, that grew even more like internationally through international expansion. We ended up like acquiring like 8 companies during 2020. We hired like a ton of people and made it all the way up to 10,000 employees. And then we did all of these layoffs along with all
Yeah.
these other companies. And so you're able to see almost like these core aspects of a company's life cycle. And I think that's so important. And also through that time, I was able to sort of build that muscle around how are you able to navigate change, because especially in the tech sector, there's one thing that's always going to be constant, and that's change. And I get that's very jarring for people. It certainly was for me, because I was dreaming of the day when I solved all the problems and could put my feet up on the desk and just chill. Like spoiler alert, that reality doesn't exist. But you have to go through those uncomfortable feelings of change to
Yeah.
actually be able to navigate through them. And that's just made me a much better leader. Especially, I have a team of 8 folks now. And when things happen, like you have to remember, like these are people, and they look up to you as a leader. And you need to figure out, in addition to how you navigate changes in work, how do you make people feel comfortable through a situation that is inherently very uncomfortable for them? And some of that you just have to stay in a particular place for a while to really understand that, and figure out what are the different ways you navigate these different scenarios of change.
Yeah. Great answer. All right. Last question. if you have the luxury of thinking 10 years ahead, and if you want to make it 5, that's fine too. What's the path that you hope you've taken? Where do you hope to be?
So, as someone who's a planner, like, I've always planned my life. I was going to be a lawyer and a judge. That didn't happen. It's funny, like I have aspirations in the long run to become a COO of a company. I think very similar to your career. I actually think legal ops is a great way to cut your teeth on thinking about like
It is indeed.
operations more broadly at a company level, and especially like having stayed at a company and seeing it go through all these changes. I think that makes the case even more compelling for someone in legal ops to like think about operations more broadly across the company. Like, you understand the company, you've been embedded in different parts of the business, you've gotten to know different facets of the business as well. And so by nature, like, that makes folks in legal ops perfect candidates for that. And also, ever since I was a kid, I've always wanted to run for elective office. So the plan is, all right, maybe in my like 40s we'll do the COO gig, and then tying back to wanting to help people, which is what I wanted to do as a prosecutor and a judge. The thought is, hey, when I get into my 50s, let's run for office and see what happens.
Nice. So was that something like, are we coming back to Santa Rosa and running for local office there? Should we get your campaign team together now?
I've purchased my domain name because you never know when you're going to need it.
Okay.
Like I, I think like mayor of a big city would be great. Governor would be great. So, like I said, I like to aim big. I'd
Love
love
it.
to be a part of a like president's cabinet. So, the world is our oyster. We'll see where it takes us. So I have these aspirations, but given how my career has taken, a slightly different journey, and the fact that I'm actually really happy with how it turned out, I still have these goalposts, but I feel like I'm not going to be as bummed if things kind of go in a different direction.
Wow. Sean, thank you so much for taking time today. I've known you for a number of years, but I probably learned more about you in this last 60 minutes than I have in the last few years. That was a really fantastic conversation. Thanks for your vulnerability around your path. And thanks for the fantastic advice that you've given us on legal operations, legal technology, AI, and potentially becoming president of the United States.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to all the great things that Beacon has to bring.
Thanks. Take care.